Good afternoon. Today we will be exploring a topic that is fundamental in the practice of engineering, yet often overlooked in technical discussions: engineering ethics. As engineers, we have the power to shape the world through innovations we create, but with this power comes great responsibility. Ethical decision making is crucial in ensuring that our work not only meets technical standards but also serves the greater good of the society. Today, we will be exploring United Airlines Flight 811 and the ethical issues that arose after this incident occurred. Hello, everyone. My name is Harrison Lipke. I'm a civil engineering student here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I am the project manager for this group. Next, you will be hearing from Ainsley Stuhlmaker, who is our researcher number 1, followed by Sarah Zadlo, who was our ethics analyst. Finally, you will be hearing from Arlo Gaskell, who is our risk analyst.
Hi, I'm Ainsley Stuhlmaker, an environmental engineering student at UW-Madison, and today I'll be discussing the events of United Airlines Flight 811. On February 24, 1989, United Airlines Flight 811, a Boeing 747-122, departed from Honolulu, Hawaii, en route to Sydney, Australia, with a planned stop in Auckland, New Zealand. The aircraft carried 337 passengers and 18 crew members. Approximately 16 minutes after takeoff, as the aircraft was at 22,000 feet, disaster struck. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, the forward lower lobe cargo doors suddenly opened due to a structural failure, leading to an explosive decompression. This decompression caused a significant section of the fuselage's right side near the cargo door to tear away. In an instant, 9 passengers seated in the area were ejected from the aircraft and lost at sea. The force of the decompression also severely damaged the plane's electrical and hydraulic systems, complicating the crew's ability to control the aircraft. As the decompression occurred, passengers and crew members in the affected section of the aircraft faced intense wind blasts, noise, and flying debris. Those seated near the rupture struggled to hold onto their seats while the oxygen mask deployed throughout the cabin. Several passengers suffered lacerations, broken bones, and shock. According to the Aviation Safety Network, despite suffering from cockpit depressurization and losing key flight instruments, the flight deck crew, led by Captain David, managed to regain partial control of the aircraft and began an emergency descent. During the critical phase, the crew faced additional complications. Debris from the fuselage breach had damaged 2 of the 4 engines, causing them to fail. Captain Cronin declared an emergency and requested an immediate return to Honolulu. With only 2 functional engines and a compromised fuselage, the aircraft slowly made its way back to the airport to avoid further structural damage. Flight 11 arrived at Honolulu International Airport, where emergency response teams were on standby. The emergency slides were deployed and passengers evacuated. Authorities later confirmed that the 9 passengers ejected during decompression were never recovered. The investigation into the accident, conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, revealed that the cargo door failure was the direct cause of decompression. NTSB found that the cargo door latches had been powered to a nearly open position due to a malfunction in the aircraft's electrical system. A latent failure of the power isolation switch and an electrical short in a wire harness allowed the door to release mid-flight. According to the FAA, the cargo door's design had an inherent flaw that made it vulnerable to electrical malfunctions, and this issue had been noted in previous incidents but had not been adequately addressed. The investigation also highlighted the failure of multiple organizations to act on prior warnings. In 1975, a similar cargo door issue was reported on a Pan Am Boeing 747, and in 1987, a United Airlines ground crew in Chicago experienced a near accident when a cargo door partially opened while the plane was on the ground. Despite these warnings, the FAA and Boeing had not implemented mandatory design modifications that could have prevented Flight 811 accident. The NTSB ultimately recommended major changes to cargo door mechanisms and safety protocols, which led to improvements in aircraft door design and maintenance procedures industry-wide. The accident deeply impacted everyone on board, especially the families of the 9 victims whose bodies were never recovered. Survivors endured lasting physical and emotional trauma, while the flight crew, particularly Captain Cronin, was praised for preventing further loss of life. The aviation industry responded with major safety reforms, especially regarding cargo door design and maintenance. The morally relevant facts of this case revolve around the preventability of the accident, the failure of regulatory bodies, and airline industries to take sufficient action in response to previous warning signs. Passenger safety was severely compromised due to flaws in aircraft design, lapses in maintenance procedures, and slow regulatory responses, all of which raised serious ethical concerns.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stadlow. I'm a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm studying civil engineering. Today, I'm going to be talking about the ethics involved in the United States Airlines Flight 811 crash. As previously mentioned, this tragic event involved a Boeing 747 experiencing explosive decompression shortly after departing due to a malfunction in its cargo door. Today, I'll be talking about the key ethical issues that arose from this incident, including the accountability of individuals and organizations, transparency and communication, and the responsibility of engineers and manufacturers in ensuring safety. One of the first ethical questions to arise was who is ultimately to blame for this failure. Initially, ground crew members were held responsible for not properly securing the cargo door. However, as the investigation unfolded, it was revealed that the design of the cargo door was flawed, and this flaw caused the decompression. While ground crew members had a role in if the cargo door was functioning properly or not, it is clear that the fault was not solely theirs. This poses an ethical dilemma. Is it fair to blame individuals when broader systemic issues and design flaws also play a role in the failure? Years before this accident, Boeing had received multiple reports about potential cargo door failures in the 747 model. In fact, a similar failure occurred on a Pan Am flight in 1987, though no lives were lost. Boeing knew about the flaw, but failed to redesign or recall the affected planes before the 811 disaster. This raises ethical questions about Boeing's responsibility to act when they became aware of a safety risk. From an ethical perspective, Boeing had an ethical duty to redesign the door mechanism once the flaw was identified. In choosing not to fix the design flaw, immediately prioritizes cost savings over passenger safety, which is an unethical decision. Corporate responsibility means ensuring the safety of consumers even when fixing a design issue is expensive or inconvenient. Additionally, with ideas of utilitarianism, it is important to do what's good for the greatest number of people, which would mean choosing the safest option and not skipping any steps, even though they may be easier or more convenient. Overall, the lesson learned was the importance of looking at accidents from a systems perspective, considering not just human error, but also organizational processes, training, and design issues. Additionally, companies must prioritize safety over profit and take responsibility when potential dangers are identified instead of immediately blaming the ground people. Ignoring known safety risks is not just a regulatory issue, it's an ethical failure that could cost lives. The next ethical issue is transparency and public trust. After the crash, United Airlines and Boeing were criticized for their lack of transparency. Initially, full details of the cargo door's design flaws were not disclosed to the public, and there were concerns that corporate interests were being protected over public safety. By not fully admitting fault immediately, Boeing and United Airlines undermined public trust. Ethically, organizations must be honest and open about safety risks, investigations, and necessary improvements. Transparency is not just about legal responsibility, it's also about moral responsibility to passengers, families, and the aviation industry. Withholding information delays safety improvements and puts future passengers at risk. Overall, the lesson learned is transparency builds trust and accountability. Commitment to honesty and openness ensures that safety concerns are addressed promptly, preventing future disasters. Finally, I'm going to be talking about the ethical issue with engineering and design failures. The cargo door failure in Flight 811 highlights a major ethical issue. Engineers must prioritize safety in their design. The locking mechanism had known flaws since 1972 from the Pan Am flight, however, no corrective action was taken. Engineers have a responsibility to fix the issue before another failure occurred. And when a flaw is discovered, corrective actions must be taken immediately, even if it affects the production schedule or increases costs. Neglecting these known risks goes against fundamental principles which prioritize human lives. Overall, the lesson learned is that engineering ethics require immediate action when a safety issue is identified. Companies and engineers must take responsibility for their designs and implement fixes as soon as possible. In conclusion, the tragedy teaches key ethical lessons that safety must come before profit, transparency is essential, and corrective engineering ethics are critical. The ultimate ethical responsibility in aviation is to protect human lives, and failure to uphold this in Flight 811 would serve as a lesson for all future engineering and regulatory decisions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Arlo Gaskell. I'm currently an engineering mechanics major at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm here to talk about the hypothetical situation in which Boeing chooses not to fix their issues with the cargo bay hold, and the inherent risks in doing that, in choosing to go for a cheap route and not covering their expenses. And really, I'm just here to answer the question for Boeing: is ignorance really bliss in this scenario? Almost immediately, we're going to see three major financial risks. The first one being the immediate lawsuits Boeing is going to receive. Boeing is going to receive lawsuits from the victims, but as well from the government. Of course, the victims need to get repaid for the lack of efficiency and trust Boeing brought during the incident, but also the FAA, who regulates airplane safety, is going to question Boeing and why wasn't their airplanes up to date. And if Boeing refuses to uh, keep their models up to date and fix that inherent issue, the FAA has the power to ground all Boeing aircraft, which would be absolutely detrimental to revenue. Speaking of revenue, Boeing would also lose a lot of sales. They'd lose a lot of trust from the airlines that use them and the private companies that use them. And if they see that Boeing isn't willing to step in and do the ethical decision to replace all the switches and replace their issues, these companies are not going to invest. They're not going to buy in Boeing. And finally, Boeing's going to experience a lot of employee deficits. Uh, Boeing employs a lot of high level, high efficient, influential employees in their ranks. And if these high level employees see that Boeing isn't making the ethically right decision or doesn't align with their morals, they're going to choose to leave and move to their competitors. And that'll leave a big hole in Boeing's workforce that needs to be covered with primarily mid-level workers. And because of that, Boeing's not going to be as efficient. They're not going to be as productive as they once were, which will also decrease revenue and decrease their availability to create new influential aircraft ideas. Not only would Boeing see financial risk, but they'd also come across social and economical risks as well. First one being reputation loss, obviously. The American people, everyone, all the companies that invest in Boeing and buy Boeing, they're gonna see that how untrustworthy and how unethical Boeing is as a company, and they'd get lower on the social ladder. And Boeing would just turn to like the Spirit Airlines of all aerospace companies. And once you're that low on the ladder, it's really, really hard to climb back up. It takes a lot of effort because the moment someone thinks of Boeing, they're going to start thinking, oh, unethical, cheap, dangerous, as just a company as a whole. And it takes a lot of effort to build that trust back up. Not only would Boeing see reputation loss, but they'd also see industry damage, as in like the American industry of aerospace companies as a whole. Boeing is well known as a predominantly American company, and if other people start seeing that Boeing is not following these safety rules, not following these moral obligations, they could be like, hey, what if this applies to other American aerospace companies as well? And because of that, people might get a negative thought process on the American aerospace industry, and they might be looking to other options across the world, like Britain, China, or even the UAE, which all produce their own aircraft. And because of that, America in general might see an economic loss in aerospace investment from other nations, and they might see total financial losses as other aerospace companies might lose revenue from the things Boeing has done. So, in total, if I were to, if Boeing were to not go through with their moral obligations, it would be a horrible, horrible idea that they should never do. Because one, they're going to lose all their revenue. They're going to get nearly bankrupt because the FAA might just ground all their aircraft. But they'd also harm the American industry of aerospace companies. And because of that, they're basically bringing everything down with them, and America wouldn't be as big as a superpower as it is now.
In conclusion, today we learned exactly what took place on Flight 811. We learned about some of the ethical questions within Flight 811, and finally answered the question, is ignorance bliss, and what exactly would have come if Boeing did absolutely nothing after this incident occurred. Thank you very much for listening, and our group is now open for questions.